And it's Monday, the 11th of May 2020. Welcome to Together Unlocked, brought to you by Together 2012 TV. I'm Jude Gosling, Artistic Director of Together 2012. With me in Canning Town is
Julie Newman. I'm the chair of Together 2012.
And over in the West Midlands are.
Yeah, hi, I'm Robin Surgeoner, Business Director of 2012 and additional co-host of Together Unlocked.
I'm Josh Surgeoner, one of the other co-hosts of Together Unlocked, and I'm a university student.
And we're here on the virtual sofa for the next hour. We've brought our own wheelchairs with us just to give you a little bit of audio description for anybody who can't see us. I'm in my late 50s with short red hennaed hair growing out. I've got black rimmed glasses. Today I've got a turquoise blue sports top on. And behind us is a graffiti banner which we produced in association with Graffiti Life, and it shows all the different activities we do as a disabled led arts organisation. Julie, what do you look like?
Lovely. I've got silver and gold hair. I've got dark rimmed glasses. I've got a black T-shirt on, and I've got a powder blue sweatshirt hoodie over the top because it is a little bit chilly.
You first.
No, you first.
Come on, gentlemen. And we might need your
I'm wearing
slightly higher.
I'm wearing a black T-shirt that has a kind of black and white photograph of New York, I believe is taken on the top of the Empire State Building, and kind of looking down Fifth Avenue.
I thought it was one of your photos.
No.
Okay. And I am also almost in my late 50s by about 3 months, not quite. And I have lots of silvery grey white hair, glasses, mediumly shaved, and I too am wearing a blue hoodie with a grey panel middle and a red hood because yes, the weather has decided to be much cooler than it has of late.
Yeah, it's been quite a change since we last saw you and spoke to you on Wednesday, what with a bank holiday in between and everything else. How was your bank holiday weekend?
Well, actually, we had a fantastic time. I mean, you know, without gloating while everyone else is suffering, we had really lovely weather right through till Saturday night. We done some training, some land work, Zoom sessions over that time, but also on.
This is because you're a para swimming coach, isn't it?
Yeah. This is I mean, this all mixed squad, all swimmers, but then on Friday for VE Day, our street decided to have a spaced out celebration where people set up, you know, whatever tables and chairs and brought out picnics to sit at the end of their drives, which we are lucky for them to be far enough apart to you know, keep social distancing. And for those of you who know me, I like my sounds and my speakers, and so I used the PA that many of the Together goers will have, you know, event attendees will have heard some of my PA, but I kind of stuck that up as high as I could on our physically high, so as the sound would travel across, and played out a playlist that I put together specifically for VE Day, but is now also, or will very soon, be on the Together Joining In at Home website. And then Saturday, we did a Zoom quiz and party with the swimming club, where Josh and I kind of hosted it. And as we get more technically proficient with all this internet stuff, we worked out how we can play kind of really good, clean digital signal into the system, so the people that are listening get, you know, a really good sound out of their home, in their homes, of all the tunes that we played.
That sounds great. Yeah, unfortunately, our houses are too close together to have had a street party because the other end of my road is usually street party crazy, which means they organise it all, and all I have to do is make a donation. I was kind of hoping that we could have done something because I've got the sound equipment here. I could have stuck it in the doorway, but really and truly, the levels of infection are still so high in East London and the West Midlands that if you can't do it safely, it's better not to do it at all. Did you enjoy yourself, Josh? Did you find anything else online to do?
Well, kind of like Dad was saying, that we're actually kind of really lucky that we managed to get some nice weather, certainly on Friday, and then I think everyone else it got kind of, I'm going to say gradually colder, but suddenly colder. So yeah, kind of being able to socialise, safe distance on Friday was lovely to kind of see people. Um, and then yeah, kind of the rest of the weekend just kind of chilled out, really, which was nice. Kind of watched some films that I think kind of needed to catch up on, and yeah, it was just kind of fairly relaxed, and then kind of waiting around for the address last night, um, from the Prime Minister, but.
But don't worry, we make up for any cold. Josh put Emily and I through our own landwork sets yesterday, and it was good work. I've just had a message from the technical assistant to say that whilst we are on YouTube, we're not live on the Together site.
Okie doke, that sounds a little bit odd. So I will just check that page out while you keep talking. What did you enjoy doing at the weekend, Julie?
Well, I really enjoyed the films. We saw some excellent films on the television, and some of them were on, sort of like everybody's uh, availability, and some were Amazon and Netflix and Sky. So it was really a matter of just picking and choosing. I thought, when did the Queen do her speech? I thought that was a bit good.
Friday night. Missed that actually. I think we were still partying.
Yeah. Well, did you get any pictures?
No. Did you?
We've got a couple.
Oh, what, from the party? Sorry, I thought you meant of the Queen.
Oh,
And well, yeah, I
Queen.
I attempted some panoramic photography with Josh's iPhone. Perhaps we'll try and bolt those together to see if it wasn't very good. I ended up kind of, you have to spin slow and follow the arrow,
yeah.
but the arrow kept speeding up. But I'm not sure if that was me, and I ended up starting going like this.
No, that was 100% you, unfortunately.
Yeah, thought as much.
Well, we decided we'd take that weekend off, so we watched lots of films, including I love Channel 4's programming on Friday, where they've got programs like Millions Like Us, and what was the other one with Noel Coward? Great stuff. Anyway,
There was We'll Meet Again.
yeah, We'll Meet. We saw the whole of We'll Meet Again, and then as the weekend progressed, watched a lot of more contemporary films. But that's quite a good thing for us because one of the things that we do as an organisation is run a film festival. So every year we run an international film festival in December. This year it's going to be the 4th to the 6th of December. We always have a virtual component for anybody who can't get there in person because we're usually at the very wonderful Old Town Hall, Stratford. And this year it's going to be completely virtual. And we always have a big range of films from people who've made their first film on an iPhone to people who've just released their third feature film and premiered it with us. So there's lots more information about that. If you go to our website, www.together2012.org.uk, and go to the 2020 programme, we've just last week released the submissions are now open for the festival, and we're welcoming submissions. So please do send them in. And we also have within our Join In From Home programme the Film Club Challenge, which is to make a film on the subject of home. And that might be an animation, a comedy, a documentary, a drama, or anything else you can think of, like a murder mystery, even. but we will be screening those. This with the second year that we give out awards, we give out the CAT Awards in memory of the late filmmaker Catherine Aronello. And this year there will be a special award for a film about home. So if you're interested in filmmaking, we're going to come back to that later in the programme because it's one of the things that we talk about on a Monday. But I just wanted to flag that up. Have you been enjoying these straight to the screen from the cinema films? Because it's been great for us. We haven't been able to get to see a film at the cinema for years, and all of a sudden we can pay some money less than we would at the cinema and see a brand new film.
What have we watched?
We haven't really kind of partaken in any of the kind of the films that were in cinemas that then got moved to on demand. We haven't really watched. But kind of like Julie's saying, we're lucky enough to have Netflix and Amazon and Now TV to get kind of the Sky movies and things. So we've been, what did we watch? We watched Spider-Man Far From Home yesterday, which came out last year, which I didn't get to go and see in the cinema, but that was really good. But yeah, we watch a lot of the Netflix ones that kind of go straight to streaming anyway.
And what Extraction we watched, which is if you enjoy a good bit of action and some shooting, and some rude language.
I don't believe it's an 18, but yeah, if you do like kind of violent action films, it was a very good film.
I used to love all the sci-fi end of the world films, but I find myself not watching them now. So
I did see that Contagion was on like Netflix's top 10 for the week of like most watched things, and has been for kind of the last couple of weeks, which I thought was
Dustin Hoffman
a bit on the nose, but
6 months ago it would have been on my view list, but funnily enough, now it isn't. Well, we always encourage people watching to send in their artwork to show us as part of our Join In From Home programme. And in particular, we've been having a lot of content coming in from members of our associate drama company, Act Up Newham. And while we were sitting around doing absolutely nothing, and you were having quizzes and street parties and doing training sessions, Stera Plurger over in Green Street in Newham was making artwork which was inspired by the Red Arrows. Did the Red Arrows go over the West Midlands?
No.
They came over London. I don't know how she knew when they were coming because there was no time given. So the first thing I knew was when there was a kind of boom and the dogs all started barking because they're not used to aeroplanes anymore. But watch this, and then I'll just do a little bit of description afterwards for anybody who can't see it.
I'm Stera, and this is Merlot. And I made a painting of the planes flying over London. I was at home, and it was so loud. Bye.
That's a great picture.
Yes, that was a great picture. So for anybody who couldn't see it, Stera signs, and that was translated by Hannah, her PA friend and ACT UP company manager. and she was making some artwork in a very modern flat sitting on, I think, the balcony. And what she's done is it very, very clever. Some of the colours, where she's got the blue sky with paint, she's got the red arrows cut out as triangles, she's got the streams of white, she's got the buildings cut out in black as silhouettes. Yeah, just really, really effective. So thank you very much for that, Sterrett. We loved that. So apart from the change in the weather, there's been a few changes, or maybe not, maybe just confusion in terms of health advice. So we thought we would just discuss that a bit. And for us, as in people living in isolation, of course, there is no change at all. And sometimes I do wish they'd remember to include us in the advice, so we knew they hadn't forgotten about us. But still, as long as the food keeps coming, we'll know we're kind of on somebody's horizon somewhere. What do you make of the advice, Robin?
I think it was. I think it's clear if you know who that you're being talked about, if that makes sense. So I'd say Josh and I was kind of watching it, wondering whether or not they were going to say swimming clubs are open. Oh golly, does that mean we've got to go to work? Not that we would mind going to work as such, but I think that the concern is that there are going to be lots of people who, like us, are shielding and don't know whether they should be going to work. They've been, suddenly the shop or the factory or whatever, the construction site that they're associated with is all open today or open by Wednesday or next Monday or whatever. But they're like, yeah, but I'm shielding because my wife, my daughter, my uncle, whoever they might happen to be shielding with, or indeed themselves. I'm like, well, what do we do? Are we still going to get paid if we don't go to work? And there's, all that kind of real grey area. I mean, I think, as you said, for the majority of us, is to reiterate the stay at home and stay safe, stay well, stay creative. And not worry about, you've managed for 7 weeks, nearly 8 weeks, another 3 or 4, take it a week at a time, a day at a time, really.
I think that's the thing. I mean, I think we know, really, don't we? It's months and years before a sort of new normal appears. We've only got to look at the countries that are much further ahead of the curve than us to know that. I mean, in South Korea, 1 minute they open the clubs and just one person is all, within a day has infected 38 other people. So, I mean, certainly I'm really pleased that back in February we decided that everything we did this year would be virtual, because it allowed us to plan. So you'll also see on the on the Together 2012 website, under the 2020 programme, you'll see we put a call out for virtual commissions for our festival. We always run a month-long festival in Disability History Month, which runs roughly from the middle of November, although we've quite often got activities going on from the beginning of November to about the middle of December. This year, we've thrown open the commissioning to open competition. I've had lots of artists and companies put ideas in that I've never had any contact with before, so it's going to become a much more diverse festival. They've got some wonderful ideas. I'm going to be raising some money and releasing a new round of commissions soon. But that's certainly something which I think, by being realistic back at the beginning of the year, we're very well forward with the planning to say, yes, it will be virtual and it won't be fully accessible because of that. But unfortunately, neither are events in real life, which is why we always have a virtual component. And it's just going to be different this year. But I think when we think about how awful things could have been, with no food in the shops, no rule of law, no NHS operating, I think not being able to go out is a small price to pay. But it is a bit confusing. We had a text today from our dog groomer to say that she had opened the salon and we could send the dogs up to be groomed. We've got assistance dogs. I did that haircut a couple of weeks ago. It was not straightforward. But in fact, when I checked online, of course, we're not allowed to leave. Even if we could leave the house as people shielding, it's not permissible to go out for anything other than exercise and to get food. So if the dog groomer was around the corner, then we could legally make an appointment and take them for some exercise and hand them over. But it would still require, according to all this paperwork I found online, for the groomers to be fully disinfected between each pet coming in. They can only do one pet at a time. They're not allowed to take things like leads in because the virus travels on fabric. So I think she's really been misinformed. The idea that she can run something just for people that live on her doorstep and can only have one member of staff in and would have to clean the whole place from top to bottom, even though they keep very thorough hygiene anyway. I just don't see that it's possible. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of confusion today, and our message is very much, yeah, stay home, stay creative, stay well. As soon as you go out, well, in fact, of course, we know just taking in deliveries, taking in food, all of these things involve an element of risk, and we shouldn't pretend that it doesn't. So I think as we these days covering the whole of the British Isles, we'll stick to the Scottish and Welsh methods. So let's just be really clear and unambiguous about this. If you are not a key worker, stay at home.
And I think what you opened up with is kind of really important about the idea of planning. And I think that we should try to persuade people to plan to stay in, not be planning what they're going to do when they're allowed out again. And it's a very different way of thinking. Plan what you can make the most of where you're at, because you really don't know. And the more you're going, I wanted to do this and I wanted to do that, the kind of more anxiety. And there's so many reports on the news at the moment about the rising domestic violence, but at a lesser level, perhaps. Not necessarily a violent level, but certainly as troublesome. People, mental health issues and anxiety, and the anxiety that's being created by both the fear of the illness or the infections and what might happen to you, and also all being closed up in one space and getting on each other's nerves and stuff, and I think maybe it's that idea of planning. Maybe we could talk another Wednesday or Friday about how you can divvy your house up, and create safe individual zones in,
and how you put aside a space for creativity. I mean, we've had a couple of ideas just from talking to people in our usual clubs, because as well as our festival and different showcasing events through the summer, we usually run an outreach clubs program, and that's for any disabled person and whoever they want to bring with them. And we do different creative activities on different mornings. So today would be the second Monday in the month, and that would be our Photographers and Filmmakers Club with Julie. On a Tuesday, we have an art club that's very kind of craft based and quite sociable. On Wednesday, we have the Pop-Up Poetry Club, where we read and write and perform poetry together. On a Thursday, we have combined art sessions, especially for young disabled people. And on Fridays, we have a drawing and painting session. And quite a number of participants come to more than one of those because they are combined arts artists themselves. And you were saying, weren't you, Julie, that one of our regulars, Dawn, who's also a volunteer, is basically going to those clubs at home. So she says, okay, it's Monday, I'll think about doing some photography. It's Tuesday morning, I'll think about doing some art. On Wednesday morning, I'll do some poetry. And another of our volunteers, Nina, who's a mosaicist, is on furlough. Well, she's not quite on furlough, but she's only being asked to go into work I think 2 days a month. And she was saying that she produces her own timetable. So she looks at what she wants to achieve that week in terms of creative activities and other things. She makes sure she's not doing anything for too long so she doesn't get bored. And she actually has a formal schedule. So I think maybe that's another kind of thing that you can do to structure your time, because I think we've said before, otherwise it can feel like one day is very much like another and you're not having a kind of this is my weekend break, and this is my Wednesday evening when I go out with my mates, or in this case on Zoom.
Yeah, I'd like to commend your managing to say mosaicist without batting an eyelid, and it might be useful just to tell some others who may not know what that is.
Well, Nina makes mosaics, and in fact, as part of our Join In From Home program, she's coming up with some new activities for us. If you look at our website and you go to the main menu and Join In From Home, you'll see that we've mapped activities according to the club, so you can go straight to things like art club activities, family activities. And I know that with our club's program leader, Alison Marchant, who thank goodness is an installation artist, and don't even begin to get me to try and explain what she does, because I'm not quite sure myself. It's all very clever, and she uses a lot of photography and photocopying and so on. So Alison and Nina are cooking up new activities as we speak, because again, that's obviously something we're planning to do, is introduce more and more things. We have a summer together program every year where we do extra activities. So we'll be kind of weaving in and out some of those summer together activities. Well, I would say sometime soon, but perhaps not till the sun's come back out and is staying out. What did you want to add, Julie?
I was just thinking about film, and actually lots and lots of different things were going through my mind. Thinking about Nina and Mosaics, there's been quite a few programs on the television, particularly BBC4, I think, and in fact Channel 4, about archaeology. And of course, mosaics have been around for a very, very long time. So effectively, if you start to watch some of the films about perhaps Roman Britain, or even Roman Rome, then you can see some of the original mosaics that were created way back when in the day. So that was one thought. The other thought was, in terms of Film Monday, I just, before we came on air, was watching a film called The Creature from Beneath the Sea, which was made in 1955 in America. It was fantastic. I loved it. The dogs and I really had a good time with it. One of the things which I really noticed about it in terms of our film club was how they achieved the effects. I have got no idea, and it really made the film very different for me, a very different watching experience, because I was looking at how on earth did they do this and how on earth did they do that. What confused me and continues to make me think about it is the fact that they had this enormous octopus which came up out of the sea.
Spoiler alert.
That's the theme of the film. And one of the things that I couldn't work out was how on earth did they get it to do all this destruction of the, say for example, the San Francisco Bridge with people on it. In 1955, they didn't have animation techniques in the same way that we do these days. So they must have been using something quite old fashioned, but they must have been actually taking the two lots of film and overlapping them in some way. It was very, very clever. And the other thing, which of course is interesting about films like that from 1955, is spotting the different vehicles. The style of automobiles was just so different back in those days. And they really had character about them. You know, the old trucks, etc., were lovely to look at.
Yeah, I was really enjoying, I think it must have been We'll Meet Again, which we were talking about on Friday. And I remembered my granddad, and my granddad served right at the end of the First World War. But in the Second World War, he was a London bus conductor, and he was a London bus conductor till he retired in 1965. I'd never really thought about till coronavirus what it was like keeping the buses running as a key worker during the war. In 1989, which was probably only about 6 months before he died, aged 90, I'd recorded his memoirs and re-edited those a few years ago to put into various museums and things. So there's a whole chapter on working on London buses during the war and having to get out and sort of hide under the bus, at one point hiding under the bus and the bus being blown down the street. But that level of death I mean, I noticed today that social care workers have actually been dying at double the rates of other workers throughout this crisis. And it just really shows not just how abandoned the care workers have been in terms of lack of PPE and so on, but just the extra danger they're in. So, yeah, I think it made me, on the one hand, I loved looking at all the cars and the clothes and the houses, but yeah, it gave me that real sense for the first time of what it must have been like just keeping something as key as London buses going, whether it's Second World War or coronavirus crisis. So, yes, my new heroes are the bus drivers and the bus. I don't think we have conductors anymore, but certainly the bus staff.
That kind of puts my giant octopus into perspective, doesn't it?
So, Robin and Josh, I know now we're talking about film. We said we'd talk today a bit more about film sound, which I was interested in because one of the things we always say in the Photographers and Filmmakers Club is that, of course, film is 50% sound. It's not all about the picture with a bit of sound cobbled on as an afterthought.
Yeah, and kind of within sound design, within film and television, there's a number of different kind of ways you can go around sound design. So you can have kind of additive sound design. So a film like Baby Driver, for example, is a film predominantly about a getaway driver for or he's kind of being forced into being a getaway driver. But he has a really bad tinnitus from a car accident when he was younger. So throughout the entire film, or the majority of the film, all of the music that you hear is his iPod that he has in all of the time to drown out the ringing that he has. And every single kind of beat in the film, whether that be a gear shift, a gunshot, a door opening or closing or anything, is synced to a beat in a song. And it sounds both really complicated and really simple at the same time. But kind of the effect that has on the film is it's so much more powerful than if the songs were just in there but they weren't linked up. The fact that the kind of beats in the story match up with the timing of the music, it just adds. I mean, you watched it with me.
Oh, it's a great film.
It adds this kind of extra layer, and it makes the music kind of a character in the film. And a TV show that did, back to Scrubs, like we were talking about last week, Scrubs does a really good job of that in the music in the show isn't just in the background, it's part of the story. And there's some great examples of kind of storytelling with sound, kind of 2001 A Space Odyssey, Wall-E, those sorts of films. The first, even though it's a children's film, the first kind of 30-40 minutes of Wall-E, there's no dialogue. There's not a single spoken word in the entire film, or up until that point. But you can still, there's that rich emotion, and you know exactly what's going on. It's just purely from the sound design and the background music and the kind of little incidental music that comes along with it, and which kind of goes into sound effects. If you think of films like Star Wars, if you ask somebody to think of the sound from Star Wars, if they've seen it, most people will do that kind of hum of a lightsaber. That's not even close.
That was Darth Vader.
Yeah, that hum, and they have their own sound when they move, and it sounds really simple, but just that tiny little extra bit, or if you're watching, kind of fight scenes and things, when you draw a sword or a knife out of the chopping block in the kitchen, it doesn't kind of go zing, but it doesn't have that metallic kind of drawing sound. But if you kind of took a fight scene and took all of those little sounds out, or the punches, all of a sudden it doesn't have any weight because there's no impact to it. And I think
that's right, Josh. I think the use of sound as sound effects to enhance the action is really, really important. And I think it's good to highlight that, because we can make those sort of sounds off screen. It doesn't have to be happening at the same time as the camera's rolling. It can be added in later. But I wanted to ask you, Ju, there's always a problem about copyright, isn't there, if we use other people's music? How do we get around that?
Well, I suppose the first thing is not to use other people's music. And I think I'm glad you brought that subject up, because there's been a lot of discussion at the moment with artists saying they get so little money from their sound being used. If you put copyright music on something like YouTube, there is a limited ability to do that, because they have all sorts of automatic programs that pick up the fact that you're using copyrighted music. If it's generally licensed, I think it's a bit of a grey area that we should send Josh off to research. But generally speaking, people's works of art, quite rightly, have a copyright. The issue that's being discussed at the moment, though, and as a musician, Robin, I think this particularly impacts on you, is the fact that people get most of their income from touring. And that's also where they sell most of their merchandise. And if people aren't going out, there's obviously far less demand for merchandise like t-shirts and sweatshirts, even if people are still buying some things. And what musicians are saying is, look, everybody's expecting us to turn around and work for nothing and entertain the public from our bedrooms. And we're quite happy to do that up to a point. But shouldn't we at least be benefiting a lot more from the income streams of things like Spotify? So I think there's that to consider as well. I mean, one of the things that I think our dance club have done, because they only make films for the screen, is improvise soundtracks with percussion. Because some of the things you're talking about, Josh, are very much composing, aren't they? You've got a composer, and the film composer works away, and ultimately they control all the sound, and they put all of the tunes in, and the sort of music builds up. We saw a program, I think it was BBC Two, about 10 days ago, where they were really talking about the use of silence as well.
Yeah, that was the kind of next bit that I wanted to come on to, was you can add a lot to a scene with sound, but you can also add a lot by removing a lot of the sound. I'm probably one of the most famous examples of this is the D-Day scene from Saving Private Ryan. That is a hugely chaotic, massive scope kind of beach invasion scene with explosions and gunfire and all sorts of things. But the majority, and shouting, but the majority of the sound is really muffled. And there's just kind of a low ring that runs through the entire scene, which is supposed to be, kind of symbolizing the shell shock that the characters are going through. But if you watch that scene, if you put that scene in a Transformers film, and it was just a wall of noise compared to how it is, in the film, it's hugely more powerful without having that sound in. There's a film that came out, I think, last year on a similar thing called A Quiet Place, which in it they can't make any sounds because there's alien monsters that are blind, but they're attracted to sound, and if you make sound, they'll come and eat you. But the majority of that film is silent or very, very quiet, because they can't make any noise. So they play Monopoly, but they've got felt pieces, and they pick felt numbers out of bowls and things that to make no sound. but you still feel all of the tension and emotion and everything in the film. Yeah, despite there being kind of very limited noise of any kind. And I think with sound effects as well, we were talking about in Star Wars, the sound effects of lightsabers and things. I'm a nerd, which is why most of these are sci-fi related things. But Battlestar Galactica, actually, in all of their space scenes, have no sound at all. And again, that kind of
And that's
it adds
partly
to it.
because sound doesn't travel in space, isn't it?
Yeah, they're just
So it's very
there wouldn't be a huge explosion noise
true.
because so it's really interesting. It cuts between kind of scenes with inside ships, and there's sirens and people running and there's things exploding, and then it cuts outside and it's just silence. But all of the action is still going on. There's these huge fight scenes going on, but there's just no sound. And that kind of jumping between the two, I think, really works quite well. So it just shows you can do it kind of with sound and without. It's quite interesting.
And I think that, if we bring this right back to joining in at home, the sound that you want is what helps tell the story. And an absolutely perfect example was Stera's film, where they'd put in the sound of the airplanes, whether that, let's assume it was the red arrows, but they put that in at the point of viewing the picture of the red arrows arcing across the sky. And that it was really it was very timely in for today that was there. It just shows how simple it can be. That one bit of sound was enough to tell the story of that picture. So even if you didn't know it was the red arrows, adding that sound would have been enough to tell you that it was planes going through the sky. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking, we talked about our film club challenge of making a film about home, and there's sounds out there at the moment that are very much evocative of the COVID-19 crisis, aren't there? Whether it's kind of shouting "thank you very much" through doorways, which is apart from talking to people on screen, my only social contact these days is just saying thank you to people dropping off deliveries. But things like there not being as much traffic noise, just the quiet can be very evocative of what's going on at the moment because it is so unusual.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if we do a film from home, it would be like Battlestar Galactica, is if you come in our house when we're not on air, it's normally a cacophony of human living. And then you go out into the garden and all there is birdsong. No cars, no planes, and the occasional cat meowing.
I was surprised at how quickly our dogs had forgotten about planes because we're not very far from City Airport. But what's been happening is we've had a lot of helicopter traffic and they're used to the helicopter traffic. But the red arrows just completely freaked them out, didn't it?
Well, they are very, very loud, though, aren't they? And they're probably flying at a much lower height than your normal planes, even coming in and out of the city.
If you live in London on the flight paths, you'd be surprised at how low they come. Sometimes you can practically wave at the passengers. But not at the moment. And of course, that's the other thing that was announced over the weekend, this idea of quarantine. But of course, that's what's happening everywhere else already. And I noticed that the airports are getting very upset. But if we're banned by other countries from going into those countries, it's kind of hard to see how having planes come into this country is really going to help that much anyway. We just have to accept the fact that these planes are not going to be flying for a while, but there are lots of lovely birds and butterflies and insects and other very unusual things to watch. Did we have anything more we wanted to say about film sound? Because I know, Judy, you were going to tell us about an anniversary today.
Yeah, I was. I think just to finish off the film sound thing, I would like to go back and revisit the copyright, because I know there are some copyright-free tunes that we can use as filmmakers. and there are ways of asking for copyright, but I've got no experience in this area at all. I know, Robin, as a musician, you have experience, and you as a long-term artist and filmmaker, you do as well.
Well, let's come back to it. I think it really depends. I was asked to do a local piece which created a soundtrack for a film. I won't go into too many detail, but it combined poems and a couple of samples from other people's songs about London. And it basically stalled. There was no way of officially getting permission to use the music without paying a sort of ludicrously high copyright fee that was set internationally. On another level, of course, any tune written by somebody who died more than 70 years ago is out of copyright. So if you then run it through a computer and make your own soundtrack up, which means using some kind of music program and allocating instruments and so on, it is quite straightforward in that sense. But I really come back to don't use music, experiment, make up your own soundtrack. Is it Delia Derbyshire, the famous BBC woman of sound? And in fact, we now have Delia Derbyshire Days, and she headed for many years the famous sound lab at the BBC and came up with all these wonderful sound effects. But if you look back, their sound recording equipment wasn't a fraction as good as what we have on the most basic smartphone now. And everything else was an experiment. And what a great time. If you're not, if you've got time to watch this program, we'll assume that you're not out at work and you're not a key worker. This is the time to experiment with all of those things, in the same way that the kind of percussion soundtrack that you make up, it can be pots and pans in the kitchen, it can be putting different things into jars and shaking them. Yeah, I mean, you can make a massive amount of percussion noise with just what you've got in your kitchen. And by combining different things, you can get a massive, massive range of different sounds. So, yeah, I suppose I'm on the having tried to clear samples in a way that should have been really straightforward because the musicians were folk musicians and would have been very sympathetic, but their catalogue was not owned by them. It was owned by a multinational that just had one set of things. So, yeah, I'd much rather put time into being creative than putting time into trying to pay out money to use a fraction of somebody else's work. But I do think, as an artist and as an organisation that represents artists and particularly disabled artists, we would like to see musicians getting a lot more money in their pocket from now on for their streaming, please. It was one thing when Spotify was promoting their tours, but now they're not going to be touring till at least next year and probably the year after. Let's support them to get the money that they're owed when we're enjoying their music. So moving on to anniversaries, Judy.
Yeah, thank you for that. I realised belatedly that the 9th of May was the date in 1970 when the Queen ratified the Act of Parliament, which was the Chronically Sick and Disabled Persons Act. It was put forward by Alf Morris, MP for Manchester, who was a tremendous supporter of disabled people and disabled people's rights. He had first-hand experience of the difficulties that we have and the barriers through his own family, both his own family and his wife's family as well. And he was in fact subsequently the first minister for disabled people. He was a wonderful man. He was a lovely man, but he did us the most tremendous favour, and I don't think we should ever overlook the impact of the Chronically Sick and Disabled Persons Act. It was through this act that blue badges were introduced, and we still use them today, and they are a critical part of our lives in terms of our mobility as disabled people. He introduced the concept of local authorities contributing to our care so that we could live independently. He introduced the concept of us actually having recreational time and social time, which was so radical and so important to later, I think, society's understanding of what independent living for disabled people looks like. it was a 50th anniversary. I think that's significant. And I'm very saddened that I don't think I saw anywhere any notice of this. I've tweeted about it, but I didn't know how to put any hashtags in or anything like that. But I really do encourage anybody who's watching this to look at the history of the Chronically Sick and Disabled Persons Act. I know it seems like a very dry subject, and legislation is never sort of like the fun topic of the moment, but it's an important piece of legislation. I mean, it even covers things like children's education, and making sure that disabled children have got rights. It covers things like making sure that we as disabled people can go to the libraries and have access to wireless and to information. It covers things like we should have telephone access to telephones in our homes, and it was through that I successfully argued in the 1990s for my then local authority to pay for my telephone to be installed. It was a really useful and critical piece of legislation.
Is it still in force today, Julie? Has it been superseded by some of the other legislation, or
I think some of the legislation's been superseded. I think certainly the provision for children is always under review, and I think it should be actually. But I think I understand that some of the wording has been accepted as being changeable, but I've written to the Disability Law Service to ask them what the standing of the Act is in terms of our current rights.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, I remember the whole issue of, everybody should have a phone and therefore social services would put one in if you qualified and didn't have one. And what we're now facing, of course, particularly in an area like Newham, where Together 2012 is based, is huge amounts of digital exclusion. I'm very sorry to say that most of our club's participants, for example, don't have broadband and therefore wouldn't be able to access this service. We know that lots of people living in isolation have still only got very limited pay-as-you-go phone access. And over the next couple of years, that needs to change. And I'm very pleased that Newham Council is actually investigating all sorts of ways that they can change it. But we were looking at the amount of data you need to access a Zoom meeting and therefore to be able to access a college class, a school class, a work meeting. That is a lot of data. On a mobile phone, you could use up half your monthly data in just one hour meeting. So yeah, I think that right to a phone in modern times really should be right to broadband in that fixed phone line, and we need to work out what's happened to those rights.
I think there's ways to cover that, and looking at the wording and bringing it up to date. But as I say, at the moment, I've written to the Disability Law Service and I'm waiting for a response. But I think it's something that we should come back to, particularly given that we're using internet services, which we know that an awful lot of people who would be interested in and participating in these broadcasts aren't able to even access.
Oh, that's absolutely right. And what I would say is that the vast majority, if not all, of our join in from home activities can be explained to somebody over the telephone. So if you've got a friend that you think would enjoy doing it but has only got limited or no internet access, why not take the time to say, hey, have you been feeling a bit bored? Do you fancy an idea for something to do? There's some very simple and straightforward ideas on the website. For example, our poetry challenge is to write a poem with the theme of Together, and we'll be publishing the best of those in an anthology in the autumn, as well as reading them out on air. So that took almost no time at all to explain. It takes rather longer to write. But yeah, do pass these ideas and suggestions on to other people, and just make sure that if you are well connected, that you remember that other people aren't. I think sometimes just getting basic news when the TVs went digital, Lots of people in private rented accommodation stopped having TVs because they didn't have fixed aerials that they would need in order to access the signal. And again, I think we take an awful lot for granted when we look at the sort of changing government information and so on. Some people won't even hear that information for days or weeks, let alone hear it accurately. So it's really important to keep passing it on. Did you want to add something, Josh?
Well, a bit from both of us on this, because the production office has just sent it, reminded us of there is a course, but the closing date for it is tomorrow. But it's a free music production course for kids aged 8 to 14. Although I guess theoretically anyone could join it. But it's well, Josh has got it in front of him now.
Yeah, it's aimed at kids 8 to 15, but it says that parents and siblings are free to join in. So it's a 4-day online course run by a company in America, I believe. So it's split over 4 days. So the first day is on drums and beats. The second day is on bass lines. The third day is on chords. And then the fourth day is on melodies. So I think it's kind of teaching them kind of the basics of, the kind of building blocks of songwriting or creating tracks, and then kind of merging them into, well, a song or a tune.
Which fits very well with what you were saying about being creative. So as soon as we're off air, we'll send that link.
Yes, so on our website, we have a Together 2012 TV highlights page, which is linked from the main menu under the Together Unlocked page. And we'll put up any links for anything we've discussed, and also that copy of Starra's film for anybody who would want to watch it again. Just tell us now, though, Josh, is there a relatively straightforward website address we can just give out on the air?
Julie,
No.
turn your mic away. Sorry.
The simple answer to that is no. If you Google, the company is called Beat Drop. So if you Google Beat Drop music course.
Beat Drop music course.
Beat Drop. Yeah. It's www.beatdrop.ca. You will be able to find some links and things.
Julie says that's Canada, she thinks. Canada?
It might be Canada.
Because it comes under a time band, like a time zone called MDT.
No, it is Canada. I've just checked.
So maybe that's Montreal daytime.
It's Mountain Daylight Time.
Okay.
I didn't even know that was a time zone.
So we all dream that we're suddenly in the mountains. I mean, Canada is about 5 hours plus behind, so that probably won't be an issue if it's a daytime course. It might be difficult if it was a bit later, but it sounds like a fabulous course, which, yes, I can see lots of us pretending to be 8 in order to do that. So we're coming to the end of today's show. On Wednesday, we've always got several regular items on Wednesdays. Josh will be reporting on gaming and what virtual sport might be available. Julie's assistant's dog, Precious, will be reporting on the outside world. She'll be wearing her GoPro, going out in the morning and seeing what the weather's like to tell all of us who can't actually go out at all. What else we'll be talking about? We'll be doing some poetry. We'll have Penny Pepper, our wonderful virtual writer in residence, with us, and she's going to be here every Wednesday, in fact, from now on, which we are just thrilled about. And she'll also be talking about her new live stream on a Friday. And on Fridays, we have, among other regular items, we have dressing up to go out to stay in. So we encourage you to dress up for any occasion or any adventure. Take a photo or take a video, send it to us, tell us what your adventure is, and we will show it on Friday, when we will all be dressed up to go out to stay in ourselves.
Absolutely.
And in the meantime, it's goodbye from East London.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from West Midlands.
Goodbye.
Bye.
There's no point.